The Strange Visions of Annie Behamy. On a wintry November night in 1934, our beloved Negro maid, Annie Behamy, came into my room to make certain that I was warm enough and fully covered. But when she saw me standing at the window, shivering, watching the driving snow bury the Maryland countryside within view of our house, she cried out in alarm and sent me scurrying into bed. After she had tucked me in under the feather bed covering, she sat down in the squeaky rocker beside the kerosene stove and smiled. "Robert," she said, with the rosy glow of fire from the isinglass window illuminating her cheeks, "you and me, we is going to talk. Now you know better than that. I told you 100 times before, you'll get double pneumonia standing on that cold linoleum in your bare feet. I want you to promise that you won't do that no more, you hear?" I clearly remember how I had shivered under the covers and rubbed the soles of my icy feet, and I asked, "Annie, why are you always fussing about everything I do?" When she answered, her voice was hushed and her eyes glistened. "'Cause I'm here to look after you, that's why. 'Cause your mamma and papa is stuck over in Baltimore in a big snow pile, and they won't be back until maybe 4 o'clock in the morning." "How do you know that?" I said, making an attempt to tease her, but shaken all over from an uncanny feeling of awe. She shrugged. "I just knows, that's all. Now you hush, Robert. Go on to sleep. I'll sit right here a spell and nap some." "Tell me a story, Annie," I asked, knowing that she would refuse because it was so late. "Hush, child," she said, closing her eyes. I remained silent, peeking out of the colors at her, watching the reflection of the heater's flames dance upon her ruddy face. I kept wondering how Annie knew that my parents were snowbound. Finally, I was not able to contain my curiosity any longer. "Annie," I called. She mumbled something incoherent, but I did not open her eyes. "Annie!" Again she muttered something unintelligible. The way she looked just then, and the way she continued to keep her eyes closed, sent shivers of fright through me. Despite my chattering teeth, I hopped out of bed and gingerly moved toward her. I touched her hand cautiously. She did not move. Even now, as this is being written, I remember the strange expression on her face just as vividly as if I had seen her last night. Then I crawled onto her lap, and she put her arms protectively around me. "Annie," I asked, "where are mother and dad right now?" "They's in a pile of snow, and your daddy's cussin' to beat the band, digging out the snow and putting chains on the wheels. They's way over there near Johnny Cake Road, at the place near where we all had that picnic last summer, over by the horse stables." Her voice sounded eerily hollow as I lay in her arms, listening to her heavy breathing. I began to grow aware of a strange sensation of transport, as if the rocking chair was no longer stationary on the floor. I remembered the place Annie spoke about and recalled how we'd picked blackberries there in the fields beyond the stables. I started to ask if she remembered about the blackberries, at the same time leaned over to see why I felt so peculiar, why the chair wasn't rocking despite my efforts to make it. As usual, Annie's feet were wrapped in old cloths, which she had bound about her ankles and then tucked into a pair of my father's old slippers. Then I noticed that her feet were not on the floor. Her legs were extended straight out, inches above the linoleum in midair. Kneeling on her lap, I put a hand on her arm and tried to set the rocker into motion. It refused to budge. Although this had been a favorite game of mine, rocking the chair while sitting on her lap, I could not understand why the chair would not move then. I shook her and asked why, and that was when I noticed her eyes. They were wide open, and she was staring straight ahead. She appeared to be seeing beyond the walls. "Annie!" I cried, but she did not answer. Her lips moved, and huge drops of perspiration began to appear on her forehead. Suddenly I was paralyzed with fear, thinking that maybe she was dead. I remained where I was, unable to tear my gaze from her face. Then another strange thing happened. Annie's mouth fell open as if she was about to say something. After a long while, I grew aware of an increasing sense of motionlessness. Then I realized what it was. She had stopped breathing. Just at that moment, she began to speak. "Robert, I'm going downstairs to iron your new BVDs, 'cause it won't look nice at all when them doctors and nurses at St. Agnes Hospital examines you tomorrow morning. You was going to get run over by a great big old coal truck at Winters Lane and Edmondson Avenue, and they's gonna examine you all over, and it won't look nice if you ain't got your new clean BVDs on. After they bring you home, your daddy's gonna go right out and buy you them electric trains you always been wantin'. I'm gonna have to make up the bed in the guest room 'cause your Uncle Frank is gonna come by tomorrow night. Don't you let him play with your electric trains, you hear?" Abruptly, the chair dipped forward and started to rock. Annie closed her eyes and began to breathe heavily. I shook her, but she still wouldn't wake up, so I sat there for a while, listening to her breathing and thinking about what she'd just said. When the impact of her words suddenly hit me, I leapt down and returned to the feather bed in a wild rush. At the crack of dawn the next morning, I was up and hurriedly dressing, shivering in the cold, looking out of the window at the freshly fallen snow. Annie came in, seized my ear, and with a washcloth and the basin of warm water she brought, she proceeded to wash me thoroughly. As she did so, she hummed to herself and muttered something about how it would be a god-awful shame if I was to have such a black ring around my neck and dirty feet when they examined me later that day at the hospital. I laughed and told her she was just trying to scare me so I'd let her wash me. Then she grabbed me by the shoulders and with an intent look in her eyes, she said, "Don't you say that, Robert, honey. I ain't never been wrong yet durin' my spells. Now you hush and put on this nice clean suit of BVDs I ironed." After I had put the long underwear on, she saw to it that I put on an extra pair of woolen socks. I protested at this, but she clucked her tongue and said, "Now you won't get no cold feet when you go trampin' around in that snow, and when you put on your high top boots, ain't no coal truck in this world gonna break your legs." When I arrived in the kitchen a few minutes later, my mother was just setting out the bowls of oatmeal for my father and me. I climbed onto the wooden kitchen chair with the green paint flecking off it. "Annie told me about how you were stuck in the snow last night over by the stables on Johnny Cake Road," I blurted. My father dropped his spoon. He looked at mother in amazement, and then gaped at me. Mother spoke first. "How'd Annie know that?" I shrugged and pushed my spoon into the cereal. "How should I know? She told me last night." My parents exchanged glances of astonishment. My father frowned and asked, "She told you that last night?" "Yes, sir." "What else did she say?" I shrugged. "Oh, nothing. How it was over near the place where we picked those blackberries last summer. How you were cussing while you dug the snow out from under the tires to pull on the chains and all." My mother laughed and my father frowned. Then they called Annie. When she shuffled in a moment later, she hummed to herself and took command of the kitchen, as she always did. She turned to my mother and said, "Now sit yourself down, Miss Rose, honey. I'll get your breakfast." "Annie," my father asked, "how'd you know we were stuck in a snowdrift last night?" Busy with the coffee pot, Annie did not look up. She poured the steaming coffee into their cups and said with a note of annoyance in her tone, "Never mind that none. Eat your breakfast. You're going to be late opening the store." "I'm going to drive Robert to school this morning. The bus isn't running," my father announced, rising from this table and getting his coat and overshoes. "I've got to start the car and let it warm up." "Ain't gonna do no good," Annie stated. My father blinked at her. "How's that?" Annie busied herself with the skillet on the stove. She did not turn to face him as she said, "That old Ford's frozen stiff, and you ain't gonna get it started. Robert's gonna walk to school." 5 minutes later, my father could be heard outside the kitchen door. stomping the snow off his feet and coming inside. As he angrily hung up his coat and removed his galoshes, he said, "Annie was right, Robert. You'd better get going. The car won't turn over." I started to say something about what else Annie had told me the night before, but she caught my eye and held a finger up to her lips, warning me to be silent. I didn't get it, and I frowned, but she made a face, and I hurriedly finished my cereal. A few minutes later, as Annie knelt beside me, putting on my overshoes as I buttoned my mackinaw, she whispered, "Don't you tell your mamma and papa about what I told you last night during my fit, you hear?" "Why not?" I wanted to know. "'Cause your mamma is pregnant and it's bad to worry her, and 'cause in the second place your papa is gonna holler at me, at you, and at her. But don't you worry none. Your old Annie is looking out after you, Robert, honey. I ain't gonna let none hurt you, I promise." The excitement of walking to school in the snow took my mind off the warning Annie had given me. After both of my parents had thoroughly lectured me on being careful and waiting for the traffic lights, I started out for school, carrying my book bag and smelling the fried egg sandwiches which were securely tucked inside with my third grade reader and notebook. When I reached Conville's Winters Lane and Edmondson Avenue, I stopped and looked both ways. The street was packed solidly with snow. The red light was on for the Edmondson Avenue traffic, but no cars or other vehicles were anywhere in sight. When I had seen the green light, and when I was sure no vehicles were in sight, I stepped gingerly off the curb, went around a snowbank, and again looked at both ways. Then I started across the street. All of a sudden, from out of nowhere, a speeding coal truck came roaring at me. To this day, I have been unable to understand why I hadn't seen that truck, or where it came from. The only possible place it could have come from was an alley several hundred feet down the block. There wasn't time to get out of the way. I could not cry out or jump back because the gigantic front end of the huge truck was almost upon me. Suddenly, I was aware of my book bag hurtling through the air. Something seized me in a fierce, blanket and smothering gasp. I was aware of nothing except a blur of motion. I did not feel a thing, not even the slightest pain, nor did I have any other sensations of terror or anything like that, except the comforting, somewhat stifling feeling that something like a snowy feather bed had enveloped me. My book bag! My book bag was all I kept crying out. The police were there, and a few people were standing around. One man was yelling excitedly. I saw the whole thing. The truck was doing at least 60. The boy didn't have a chance. He had the green light. The truck was running through the red light. Bumper struck the kid's head. Both front and back wheels ran him completely over. Though I didn't feel any pain, they wouldn't let me stand up. A few minutes later, they took me to the St. Agnes Hospital. My father arrived shortly thereafter, and I listened as the doctor told him it's a miracle the boy wasn't crushed. We've never seen anything like this before. The only marks on his body are the tire treads on his right thigh. The police said it was a 10-ton truck, loaded with coal. They said that both the front and double rear tires passed over his body. After I had been thoroughly examined and x-rayed, my father took me home and I was put to bed. Later that afternoon, my father's brother, Uncle Frank, came over, bringing a set of new electric trains, which he helped me set up. I remembered Annie's warning about letting him play with the trains, but because I was so grateful at having them, and because he had brought them at my father's request, I did not try to stop him from playing with them. That was when Annie's other warning came true. My uncle accidentally broke one of the cars, and after he attempted to fix it, the trains never ran again. What is even more baffling than the strange experiences which had been foretold with such uncanny accuracy during Annie Behamy's vision fit of the previous night, was the sudden disappearance of Annie herself, shortly after I had started out for school that morning. Annie vanished into thin air. She was never seen again, by us at any rate. My mother went up to her room and searched throughout the house, but Annie was nowhere to be found. Her clothing, a winter coat and galoshes, were in her room. As far as we could see, she had taken nothing with her. The only trace of her were footsteps leading out of the house into the fresh snow, footsteps that ended abruptly in the center of the yard. All Annie's friends and fellow church members had known her during the past 8 years, when she had moved to Catonsville to live with us, where I lost to understand what had happened to her. To this day, I have never been able to fathom this strange mystery and the uncanny manner in which my life had been so miraculously spared. I have never been able to unravel the mystery of what had shielded my frail body from certain death that wintry morning in November, nor was I able to determine how it had been possible for dear old Annie Behamy to know that my parents had been stuck in a snowdrift, or to foretell exactly what was about to happen to me. My mother, of course, knew Annie had something to do with the sparing of my life, but if she knew anything else about Annie's strange vision fits, she never spoke of them.